Morning, thank you very much for having me here and allowing me to speak in front of such an honourable audience. Who am I? So my name is Anita Żytowicz. As you can see, I'm Polish, but I do prefer to speak in English about it. Why? I'm not a bilingual by nature. I started learning English when I was 4, which has been a very long process at the moment, to be honest. I lived in England for a while. I lived in America as well. And when I came back, I realized that language is very, very important in our life. And I realized also that children should be brought up in 2 languages at least. Why? It's got an enormous impact on their emotions, it's got an enormous impact on their personality, and it's got an enormous impact on the perception of who they are. When I lived in the States, in particular, I met a number of people who were trilingual, and these people inspired me. They inspired me to bring my own children as bilinguals. So since actually I was pregnant, my son is 15 nearly at the moment, I've been speaking English to my children. First my son and then my daughter, who's nearly 10. You mentioned the emotions, you mentioned it's all positive at the moment. Why did I ask you about which language is first? Because to my children at the moment, Polish is first. Since the exposure is mainly to Polish, of course. I'm the source of English. Apart from that, my son plays all the games in English. He reads majority of the books in English. And of course there are teachers, which are a big problem, to be honest, in Poland for bilingual children, unfortunately. My daughter, however, as far as my daughter is concerned, I am the sole source, no, not the sole, the main source of English for her. There is the teacher at school who's a problem. And then there are a number of friends. We have a lot of international friends, and she talks to them in English. When we travel, and we do travel a lot, they both use their languages freely without any problems. I might say that bilingualism of my son is much stronger than bilingualism of my daughter, because he's older, first of all, and secondly, he has started appreciating it. Emotions and pride. At the moment, I might say my son is very proud of his bilingualism. But I remember when he was 6 and 7, he was exposed to a lot of prejudice. A lot of prejudice. We were both exposed to negative emotions from Polish people. Apart from surprise, which was natural. How come you speak English to your children? Are you mad? Are you aware of what harm you're doing to your children? These were the things I encountered. You know what? Your children are not going to start speaking. Your children are going to be retarded. Your children are going to be disabled mentally because you are speaking the second language to them. You're completely crazy. That's what I heard from the very, very beginning of my children's bilingualism. But it's a long story. I could go on and on for hours. I would like to talk to you today about the research I'm carrying out. I'm pursuing my PhD dissertation in linguistics, of course, and bilingualism, which has always been a major area of my interest. I decided to connect with translation. Translation is my second field. This is my job. I'm a professional interpreter, translator, certified interpreter and translator. I lecture at university. I've been doing it for 13 years at the moment. And I do a lot of translations on a daily basis. And one day, my professor said to me, you know what, why don't you join these 2 topics? And I said, how can you join these 2 topics? So she said, well, there are children who are bilingual and who translate. So I said, well, yes, pretty obvious. But I had no idea that there is a concept which is studied widely, which is called child brokering. And these are the bilinguals, okay? They're bilinguals, and these bilinguals translate for their parents. They do that on a daily basis. Nothing special all around the world. There's lots of study. There's a lot of research about that. However, in Poland, it's a pretty new phenomenon because not many Polish children have been studied in this aspect. So that's what I'm doing, and I will tell you about preliminary research results. Just very briefly what I'll tell you about. So just a few words, literally a few, about child brokering, then about my study group, and then the questions I asked my kids. My kids meaning the 34 that I have talked to so far. If you know of any children who would like to talk to me, I'll come. I go to England and I carry out the research in England, and I meet them there and I talk to them there in their conditions, because it's very important to eliminate this stress, anxiety that might appear, and of course it does, I'll tell about it in a second. And I go there and I ask the children the questions. So first of all, where do you translate? These are the interviews I carry out. Where do you translate for others? When do you translate for others? How do you feel when you translate for others? So these emotions are very important for me. And I'll show you some samples. I'll show you some samples of what the children actually said. And if you think it was easy for them to identify the emotions, you're wrong. It was very, very difficult. Can you see the differences between living in Poland and in the UK? And I'll also tell you what the children said. And finally, I'll conclude. I'll try to draw some preliminary, but please beware, these are preliminary conclusions. Because I know that my friend has managed to collect 6 more children for me, so I'm very happy and looking forward to talking to 6 more. So if you have any more, please bear me in mind. So what is child language brokering? The first thing you have to be aware of is that there were 2 people, especially the first ones, Harris and the second Sherwood, who studied bilinguals, and they concluded that all bilinguals possess a natural interpreting and translating skills. These are natural. They do that on a daily basis. They translate in their mind non-stop. Very often unaware of that. And then the very concept of child language brokering was introduced into literature by Lucy Tse in 1995, who studied children who were bilingual in Chinese or Vietnamese and English. So the parents emigrated at a certain time and then their children became bilingual. All child language brokers bear certain characteristics. First of all, they must be bilingual. Now, we may discuss whether this bilingualism is early or late, because there is a distinction, as Professor DeWell suggested. And my children, the children I talked to, were both early bilinguals and late bilinguals. So that means they acquired their second language when they moved to England at the age of 1 or 2 up to the age of 3. And there were children who moved to England when they were 10, for example. And now they're 18 and they are bilinguals, because they speak both languages at the same level. And you might ask me, which language do they treat as their first language? Hard to tell. All of them, when I asked them about their identity, they said, we're Polish. All of them. Even those who were born in Poland, because all of them were born in Poland, but they moved when they were 1. And they still say, we are Polish. So that's very good for us. What more? The children or teenagers must be, of course, under 18. And then, what is very important to call them brokers, the most important thing to call them brokers is the fact of translation, the fact of mediation. They do translate for whom? That was a question I asked to my children. There's a lot of data in literature which says that they translate in a number of circumstances. They translate in shops, they translate at the doctors, they translate in a bank, at the police station, they translate at the barristers, they translate at school. So we could go on and enumerate the places where they translate. And finally, this translation has an impact on, and it has an enormous impact. Being child broker and the fact of translating for others has an enormous impact on human relations that they build with others. The relations with the parents, it has an enormous impact on that as well. Then on the whole adaptation process and their intellectual and personal development, their personality as such. I went to 2 cities, Oxford and London, and I carried out my research there. So altogether, I talked to 34 kids, as I've already told you, 34 young people. Should I call them kids? Probably not. They were more teenagers. Why? Because there were only 3 who were between 7 and 9 years old, and the majority was above 10 up to 18. as you can see. I've put the numbers for you here. All my interviews were semi-structured, they were taped, and of course I followed the norms suggested by Cresswell and Babbie, who have very, very specific, detailed norms concerning how to carry out interviews, how to ensure the security, especially surrounding, and which things have to be taken into consideration, so that then nobody would tell me, no, it's invalid. I was very, very particular about making it valid. Altogether, there were 23 girls, 11 boys, and the whole research is more than just the interviews, because when I finish it, I would like to apply a convergent parallel mixed method. So I would like the research to be counted in a qualitative as well as quantitative way. I haven't done this part yet because I haven't finished. So far, I'll tell you about the qualitative results of these 34 interviews. All these kids share one thing in common: they were born in England. The second thing in common is that they all speak English and Polish on a daily basis. The third thing, is a little different because the number of years they've spent in the UK varies. So, that was minimum was 1 year, maximum 12. As you can see, the range is pretty big, and of course it does impact the level of English, yes, of course, but it does not mean that those who have spent a year only do not undertake translations. They do. So you can imagine, there was a girl who came to England when she was 11, she's 12 now, and she's already been acting as a mediator. She has already been a language broker. Okay, so just some more, to make you smile, some more important facts. Cresswell said that we have to ensure appropriate conditions for interview carrying out. And Babbie suggested that once we've ensured these conditions, the interview has to be organized in a specific way, and we should build up a command with our interviewee. That's what I did. I ensured proper conditions. Okay, that's from the Museum of Sherlock Holmes, just to make you smile, please. That's my daughter, this bilingual girl I mentioned, and we were enjoying ourselves. And that's the command I built with the kids. Building that command was very, very important, actually, because at the beginning when we started the interviews, they were very stressed. You know, there's this lady. All the interviews were customary. I came there, and to be honest, it was very difficult to find the children. So I asked my friends, and I said, you know what, I need this research. I want to pursue my PhD. I can't find anybody. Could you help me? So I got these kids, and when I saw them, because they were all in different places, so my friend just took me by car from place to place. Sometimes I talked to one child at a time. Sometimes I talked to 2, 3, 4, 5. The largest group was 6. And I came there, and there I was, a stranger, asking them questions, and they were looking at me suspiciously. They were very, very intimidated, embarrassed, and they were shy. So I tried to build this command with them. I said, I have a daughter like you, and she speaks English and so on. So it was very, very important for me, because then it was facilitated. It was much easier to get answers from them. So I asked them the question, where and when do you translate? It turned out that all of them translated at school. Either for each other, because there were kids who came to England and for whom other brokers served as mediators, and then the same kids served as child brokers for the next who came. But then there were situations when the parents went to talk to the teacher, for example. And they went with the parent to the teacher to talk about them. So you can imagine this strange situation. There I am, the teacher's talking about me, and I have to translate it to my parents. Oh my God. So I asked them, and what did you say? Did you lie? Oh, no, she didn't say anything wrong. Oh, okay. So it was very, very interesting. So basically school is the major place of translation and programming for them. Second place, should I call it a place? Text messages. All nearly, majority, reported Some of them were young, as you can see, so these young ones did not do that, but all the old ones, all the above 10 did that. That their parents get text messages, and they translate these text messages for the parents. For example, mommy gets a text message from her boss, and the child answers. And then emails, letters, different kinds of emails, formal emails, informal emails, bank statements, for example, as well, any kind of inquiries. So they do translate that as well. And then, I haven't mentioned that yet, but second part of my PhD research focuses on translation strategies. So I decided to apply a questionnaire. I designed myself personally a hospital admission form, and I prepared this form in English, and I delivered this form to all the kids who were above 11 up to 18, and I asked them to imagine they're going with their mom to a doctor, and they had to translate it for their mom. Their mom was to be admitted to a hospital, ward, clinic, or whatever, and they had to translate it for their mother. And they did it for me. I taped it too, I recorded it. So this is the additional part of my research. You might ask me, why did you choose hospital? I don't know, intuition. I just read a number of publications on child brokering, and this hospital context prevailed. The majority of articles were published on children translating at school and in hospital. So that's why I decided also to check whether my children, I can call them my children, would translate for their parents in hospital settings. Yes. As you can see, 16 were taken to a doctor or a hospital and translated for their parents. Then there was a shop, of course, phone. Yes, they do answer the phone for their parents, or their parents are talking to somebody on the phone and asking the child to translate at the same time. Bank, 5 people. Homework, they do homework for their parents, believe it or not. Not many parents are eager to learn English, unfortunately. That's what the children told me. But among those who do, well, some of them ask their kids for help to check their homework. Finally, work. The children mentioned, teenagers who were 16 and 17, mentioned that they do some part-time jobs. And whenever a Polish person comes, they are asked to translate. So they translate at work as well. Finally, at home, if a neighbor comes, a postman, a policeman comes, it doesn't matter. The parents ask them to translate. A barrister, two people were taken by the parents to a barrister to translate for them. There was some legal issue going on. And 2 girls reported translating during a film. And they mentioned it was very irritating, because they were trying to enjoy the film. And the parents were non-stop interrupting them and asking them, how do you say that, what did they say? Okay, I divided that into boys and girls, so you can see just a random rough division. This is the major group, the school group, then those emails and text messages. There were 11 boys, just to remind you. So as you can see, boys translate pretty often. There was one situation here when only the girls translated, because only the girls took part-time jobs. I don't know why the boys didn't, but just the girls did. And in legal issues, one of the boys who was 18, he told me something like, my parents took my sister. And I said, why did they take your sister? I don't know, they think she's more responsible. So, what did they feel? Just generally? First of all, they felt proud. I asked them, so how do you feel? What is it like to translate? And they said, I don't know, okay. I mean, yeah, but what do you feel? I don't know. So then I said, are you stressed? No, it's not stressful. Okay, are you embarrassed? No, most of them, not all. Most of them said no. I said, so what do you feel? Are you happy? Some of them said, yeah, kind of, yeah. All of them but 2 spoke to me in Polish, interestingly. Even those who've been living in England for 90% of their lives. Like the boy who's 11 and has been living there for 9 years now. He said, no, I want to speak Polish. Only 2 girls wanted to speak English. So happiness and pride. I reported these feelings in 12 cases of girls and 4 boys. Then there was the feeling of importance. I'm special in a way. I need it. They said, I'm just being helpful. It's great to be helpful. 7 girls, 4 boys, then frustration. One girl said, you know, it's irritating when you have to translate non-stop. And they do ask you to translate non-stop. And 2 boys mentioned that. Prejudice. They did experience prejudice when translating for others. One in each case. Fun. They said it's fun. They literally named it, it's fun. 2 girls and 1 boy. Embarrassment. There was one little girl, she was 8, she was very shy, but she was lovely, she really said a lot. But then she said, you know, I'm embarrassed when I have to translate. I said, do you? Oh yeah, I do. And in a number of situations. And one boy said the same. One girl said, you know, I feel smarter, I know, and they don't. And one boy said the same. Some of them said they're confused, it's strange, you know, it's kind of weird to speak 2 languages and translate. And then power. One girl said, I'm more powerful than them. I'll show you just briefly, quickly, what the children actually said. They said it in Polish in 90% of cases. I translated it for you, well, as skillfully as I could. So, my headmistress asked me to translate for some newcomers. I got a detention when I tried to translate something for Milena during a test, you know. So first the teacher asked a girl to translate something, and then a teacher gave her detention because she did. But I'll come back to this particular case, to this particular girl, because this is the one who said that she's powerful. I was taken from school to go to a kindergarten to help small children. It was a boy, it's very important, it's a boy. I was so embarrassed. I was the only one to leave school for half a day. I didn't feel lucky. I felt proud. Later he said, I felt proud. I said, so what did you feel, you know? Yeah, I was so embarrassed. I said, okay, but was it in general, you know, you were in a way special. You were the only one to be taken. He said, you know what, I wasn't special to my peers. They were all staring at me, and then they were asking me those questions. So where did you go? You went to the kindergarten. He was 13. So a 13-year-old going to the kindergarten. It's harder to speak 2 languages than one, some of them said. I don't feel stressed, I feel proud. I got frustrated, I had to translate non-stop. They never said thanks, they just thought I was obliged to do it. A remark from a girl who was 18. Translating isn't scary. I feel proud we can translate for others. That was the opinion that was shared in a group of 5. I feel proud, but you know, it's not a big deal, they said, to translate. I'm happy, I can help. I feel I'm special. You can see that. And then, it's good to know 2 languages. I'm always happy to help. That was a girl, she was 18. And she said, I'm proud and I can get some extra money working as a translator for adults. She did. Some people knew she was bilingual and they asked her to translate for some little remuneration. Great. I feel helpful and clever. There isn't a single day when I wouldn't help others. That was a boy. They don't think, they scream, help me. They expect of me to help them. And that's when I said, well, it was weird to translate at the beginning. I felt like a translator. It isn't stressful, but if I have to do it non-stop, I feel irritated. It's funny to translate for parents. Look at that. Well, I understand they don't. And they're the older, and they should speak better. Children express this kind of confusion. Yeah, you know, what's going on? We're just kids, and we translate for the adults. And they were even more, it expresses their worries. They express their worries about the parent not being willing to learn English. We're still children, and we're quicker on the uptake. This was the 8-year-old girl. She said, you know, we learn quicker. It's obvious that we speak better. We learn quicker. And that was good. That is a boy. Yes, there was a boy who came there, and he was 14, and he came there when he was 13. And I asked him, you know, you must have had some background knowledge. You must have been able to speak some English. And he says, oh, come on. Even a Polish teacher of English wouldn't manage to understand them, meaning the English teachers. They speak different English. Okay, so that's what he said. And then I said, okay, so they translated for you a lot. I said, oh yeah, a lot. And then I translated for them. Imagine a Polish boy 14-year-old, helping Brazilian boy. I said, how can you help a Brazilian boy? How can you interpret for him? How can you translate for him? He said, I speak slower English. Okay. So he said, I have a feeling I'm helpful. When I came here, everyone was helping me too. And then one of them said, you feel proud of sort of special. It's a great feeling that you can do more than others. That you can be helpful and needed. Difficulties. Of course, I asked them, have you ever encountered any difficulties? And what do you do if you have any problems with the language? And what kind of problems do you have with the language? So the major problem they advocated was vocabulary. If they have any problems, they do not understand simple words. I said, all right, and what do you do if you don't understand simple words? And what do you think they do if they don't understand simple words, if they can't find the equivalent? Well, there is Dr. Google, who helps, if I may call him a who. Dr. Google, they go on the internet and they check. So I said, right, what if there's no internet access? There's always internet access. I said, okay, but if you don't have your phone? All right, if I don't have my phone, they had to think for a while, and they said something like, I get a dictionary. I said, come on, don't tell me, you're at the doctor's and you've got a dictionary at hand. And then they thought, okay, maybe not. So I asked for clarification. But that was the answer I had to elicit from them, I had to get from them. Medical vocabulary was this vocabulary. After we did the second part of the research, so after they translated this hospital admission form, they did say that, yeah, medical vocabulary was very, very difficult. They don't have problem with understanding in general. They do understand sentences. They can convey the meaning of a sentence, but they cannot understand single words. Differences. So, what is better? Why is living in England better for these kids? They said generally it's easier, better, there are work opportunities. Then, there's better future, they're going to have better future. Even, what is quite interesting, all of them said that they will not live in Poland. They don't want to come back. Some of them mentioned we might not live in England. We might move somewhere else, but we're not going to live in Poland. The school level is lower. All the children said the same, that English schools, unfortunately, in their eyes, of course, please understand it, in their eyes, represent much lower level. They said that English people have much more positive attitude, they're much more helpful, much more open, much more tolerant. They don't care what you're wearing, they don't stare at you, even if you go to a shop wearing pajamas, as one of the children said. They don't care what you look like. They don't jump queues. Children said that's better. And in Poland, everybody does. They're more tolerant in general, however, the children experienced prejudice. They're more sensitive. What does that mean? That means that you have to be very careful what you're saying, not to offend them. They're very sensitive over racist remarks. And some children said that you have to be really, really careful and select your vocabulary with due care and diligence, because you may offend a person easily. Prejudice. They did experience prejudice, unfortunately, not from English people, meaning the English-born, English 4 generations, but those English people who have immigrant roots. So bilinguals from the 2nd generation, so their parents, for example, migrated there, and their parents can speak hardly any English, but the children were born in England, Pakistani, Afghani, and African English, were the 3 nationalities that the children mentioned. They teased them, they pick on them, they laugh at them, they even threw stones at them in one case. One boy reported that. So 3 boys and 2 girls mentioned open attack on their face, open prejudice. And finally, they also mentioned the red light. They said that living in England is easier because you can cross the street on the red light. Okay. And then, just a quote from what the children said. My grandma said to me, a girl said when she came to Poland, you've lost weight, finally. Well, here, she said, in England, they will say, "You've lost weight, bravo!" In Poland, people are trying to make your life worse than theirs. Wow, that's scary, don't you think? That is really awful. The teachers in Poland, one of the girls came back. She lived in England for 3 years, and she came back to Poland for 2 years, and then she went back to England. And she, unfortunately, I talked a lot to her about this, and she said it was a very difficult time for her living in Poland. Her accent was much better. She could speak, she could communicate, just what you said a few minutes ago. She could communicate freely. She did not know the rules, though, but her teacher was picking on her in front of the whole class. The teacher tried to lower her self-esteem and confidence. And she mentioned she was very unhappy and she wanted to go back to England, so they returned to England. There was a boy, 18 years old, living in England for about 7 years, and he said an interesting thing. When I came here, they had to reallocate me to a higher grade, as I knew more than my teacher. She had to use a calculator to count, and I did it all in my memory, in my head. And he was also picked on that, because of that, because his mathematics skills were much higher. Okay, so just what conclusions can we draw from that? Of course, I'm going to analyze these interviews over and over again, and before I write a paper, I'm sure I'll come up with something more than just that. But the thing I would like to share with you is that all bilinguals translate, all child brokers translate, Polish teens living in the UK translate in a variety of settings. My personal children, my son and my daughter, translate very often for their peers at school. When we were in the States, they would translate for our friends' children who you know, were just children living in Poland, learning English at school in Poland, right? So they were unable to understand a lot. So all of them translate. Are they aware of this translation? No, they treat it as something absolutely natural, something they got used to, something not special. That's how they call it. Yeah, we do, okay. What's the big deal, they said to me. Okay, we do on a daily basis. And they feel positive about it in general. In general, they perceive brokering as something, you know, everyday chore, they called it. They get frustrated at times, yes, but in general, they're positive. They experience prejudice, yet they don't want to come back and live in Poland. And I concluded, observing them, looking at them, watching them, talking to them, that thanks to brokering, due to brokering, they became more mature. They're much more responsible. They take responsibility over for their parents. They represent their parents in a number of situations. They stand up for their parents as well. Okay, so the case is to be continued. Thank you very much for your kind attention.